Hello, Internet. It's me, Hewlett, with another D-Geek Diary for you. A glorious Toronto sunshiny day, so I thought I would drag this show on the road, get out on the deck, and shoot it out here. So today I'm doing a follow-up Friday on the tips and traps of home buying, of which I'm very excited because there were a lot of amazing comments, and I want to dive right in and get them right here. I got them on the tablet because I'm so organized. I'm going to start with Darren Polson, who says, stick to your budget. Such good advice, basically. With a house, it's very, very easy to sort of just keep finding yourself, oh, it's just $5,000, oh, it's just $10,000, oh, it's just like $50, $100, because you're dealing with numbers that you don't normally deal with on a daily basis. Like, you're dealing with a mortgage, you're dealing with something that's going to be paid off over, 30 years or 100 years or however long it's going to be to get you, out of the bank's debt. But the point being is that it's very, very easy to get carried away. So Stephen Cerruti goes on a little further and says that everyone involved in the process is invested in selling you more house than you can afford. So it's so true. There's always more closing costs and things you can do and add-ons and bells and whistles and all this kind of stuff. Very, very quickly, you'll find yourself over your budget. First a little bit, then all of a sudden a huge amount. It's just so easy to get distracted and find yourself with more house than you can afford. So the other thing that Stephen says, which I think is a really good point, was he's saying it's very hard to recognize the house of your dreams if you've been looking at houses beyond your price range. So if you're there looking for $2 million houses and you've got $1 million to spend, well, you're not going to find your dream house because you're looking at houses you can't afford. So basically his advice is when you get in there, find out what the price is before you start looking at houses. So make sure you stick to your budget. He says, what does he say? He says, know what you can afford, repeat it often and loudly, and stick to your guns, which I think is very, very good advice. So stick to your budget. Great ones. Thank you, Darren and Stephen, for those. Poe the Ghost says, always meet your neighbors, which is incredibly smart advice, because the reality is I've been so fortunate with neighbors. The neighbors actually just behind us here yesterday came by, or the day before, came by with this beautiful thing of brownies, some of the most delicious little brownies with little nuts in them, and the key to my heart is food. It's just so important that the people that you're going to be so close with, that you're going to share property lines with, and trees and fences and all this kind of stuff, it's so important that you know that you're going to be able to get along with them. I mean, obviously there's certain things you can't know in advance, but the reality is I have been so lucky. And my father was actually, when we went and looked at this house, he basically accosted this guy in the alley at the back and said, you live here, what's it like, and blah, 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 and got this whole lay of the land from someone who's on the street. So just very, very smart. As I say, neighbors, and if someone moves in beside you, do the brownie thing. It's so smart. I love these guys already. I hardly know them, but the goodwill you do with that is just so, honestly, I think it was heartfelt from their perspective, but it's also just a very smart move because you're going to be living basically, with these people. So definitely know your neighbors. Thank you. Very, very good advice, Poe the Ghost. Ontario Movies. Hello, Ontario Movies, who's probably still making movies, I'll bet. You should check them out. Tree location on the property. Tree roots run up to 2.5 times the full leaf width of the tree. Such a good point. The point is that basically what you see of the tree is the pruned version. It's the version that's been cut back, that hasn't grown entirely, that, people have lopped off bits as necessary, but over the years they've grown quite large. Well, the roots are twice as much as that. Underground, never been cut, never been pruned, so they will find their way into your foundations, into your plumbing, into all sorts of stuff. So you can get in a lot of trouble with that. I know I will, because I've got trees right by my house that are absolutely massive, actually taller than the house. So I'm sure I'm in trouble on that already. So thank you, Ontario Movies, for giving me nightmares, not just with your films, but with also the advice on trees. Next up, Secret Trekkie says, he's got a number of, or she's got a number of points here. She says, pay an independent financial advisor to help make sense and explain all the mortgage options, tracker, fixed, interest only, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So basically, this is not advice that I took. I'm not sure I agree with you. I went to the bank manager at our place, and we talked through mortgages and stuff. In fact, I think it's very, very, very good advice to say go and get some mortgage advice, because there's stuff out there you just don't know exists. For me, example, the mortgage we have on this house is based on my retirement savings. So basically, my retirement fund is used as collateral on a mortgage, so I'm basically mortgaging money off myself and charging myself a huge interest rate, but I get to keep that because it's an investment in my interest, it's sort of like interest on my retirement savings. So definitely look into this. All sorts of things out there that I bet you're not aware of because you're just not, this isn't your business. So definitely go and talk to your bank manager. Secret Trekkie saying pay an independent financial guy. Maybe that's necessary for you guys where you are, but for me, it was just a matter of going to the bank. It was just a great bank manager who walked us through the whole thing. But definitely do your homework on the financial side of it. Very, very smart. Speaking of doing your homework, they say do your homework, research the local area you want to live in, ask a few of your potential new neighbors. As I said, like my dad was so smart. He just sort of marched outside, grabbed the first guy who lived on the street, and just grilled him about what it was like living in the neighborhood, how noisy it was, what development's going on, all sorts of stuff. Very, very, very smart. So. Also never pay the list price. This is an interesting one because I would say That's a tough one. I mean, they're saying, look, you should never pay the list price. You should always try and negotiate a better deal. Obviously, try to negotiate, but the reality is, like in a market like this, it's insane. There's like multiple offers on things. People are selling their houses for hundreds of thousands of dollars over the asking and stuff. So that is very difficult in this market, certainly in Toronto. I mean, that said, when we were in California and we bought our place there, it was a big downturn in the market. We got it for like 100 under the asking price. So, you never know. But definitely, I think the advice there is just basically negotiate. Be prepared to negotiate. And the last point that he makes, which ties into this, is be prepared to walk away because there is always another property. As I said in the top 5 tips, there is always another house. Use that to your benefit when you're negotiating on these house sales. So very, very good points. All of them, thank you very much. Tin's got a bunch of points here too. Look at more than one house at a time. Very, very smart. I never fixate on one house. Obviously, find the house of your dreams, but keep looking. Find out what else is out there because you'd be surprised. You'd be surprised how many houses out there are perfect for you and fit your needs just as well as the one that you're that you're drooling over at the time. So definitely look at more than one house at a time. Number 2, give yourself time to look and see what's out there. That's a really good point. We took like a year and a half before we closed on this house. We looked around everywhere, made sure that this was the area we wanted, made sure that the price range was right, and we weren't in a rush to move. If you're in a rush to move, it's going to affect your price. That can jack your price up a bit because you're trying to get in there and you're sort of desperate to get in there for deadlines and stuff. So definitely keep that in mind. Try to give yourself as much time. Not everyone has that luxury, but try to give yourself as much time as possible to look around. So next up, don't feel pressure to purchase the house just because other people look at the same house. It's interesting because you go into an open house and there's like 20 people and they're all going, ooh, wow, what a wonderful place. You like freak out and want to put an offer in like that hour. It's a good point. Just sit back. Think about what you're buying. Make sure it's the house you want. Don't feel pressure just because you think there may be a lot of people looking at it. There may be a lot of competition. There may be, very well. But it's still not going to help you if you're not buying the house that you want. You're just being sort of pressured into it. So don't let that freak you out, as it has to me on many occasions. In fact, I don't like going to open houses with lots of people. In fact, I prefer not to go to open houses. I like to walk through the house myself, so there's no pressure and you don't feel like you're in other people's way or that you're going to give something away or something. So, but I'm an antisocial jerk anyway. So, next up, remember that not all sales are final and that you can put things in the agreement of purchase. This is great. The reality being is even when you have a deal for the house, make sure that you put things in the contract that you need. Make sure that those, the plumbing is working. Make sure that the electrical is right. All those things that could turn up in reports and things, you want to make sure that stuff is cleared up and that it's in the contract. Just because you have the contract doesn't mean you have to buy the house. You want to make sure that the contract covers you and make sure that you've got all the things that you need dealt with before you get in the house. And if they're not, then you don't get the house. As simple as that. So, or they don't get to sell the house is a better way of putting it, perhaps. Last point, very good one. Safety checks for fire hazards, poor wiring, bad steps, safety rails, all that kind of stuff. Really, it's something that I don't do because I figure when I get in there, I'm like Elmer the safety elephant. I want to fix everything right away. Like, for example, whenever I get into a new house or even a new rental, I take down all of the fire alarms or smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors, and if they don't have them, I put them in, and I just put in new ones because then I know they're the ones, they're good, I know that they're up to date, and all that kind of stuff. I'm like obsessive about that. But yes, good point. Let's make sure the place is safe before you move into it. Probably a good idea. Now, the following ones sort of come under this sort of heading of sort of change and what time and change will do to your house. Like, you've got the house you love. What's going to happen if they build like a football stadium across the street, or that the house next door starts getting renovated, or that things will change. So consider what could change in your neighborhood and what could change for the worse as well as for the better. It's important because once you get settled in a house and you get set in your ways, when things start changing, they really drive you crazy. I mean, I've seen it a lot of times, especially with older people who've lived in a house for a long time and they've seen a lot of change. And when drastic change starts happening, like where house prices start going up or people start selling up and rebuilding and stuff around you, it can be really disruptive. And so you need to keep that in mind when you're buying a house. How much is change and the process of change over time going to affect your property and your love for that property. So a few of these things sort of that speak to this point. Night Skies Dark says, visit your house at different times of the day and different days and different months and different weeks and all that kind of stuff. So basically, look at your house in all the different lights that are available because, a place that looks beautiful during the day might not be maybe pretty sketchy at night or vice versa. Or, the place that we bought in California was gorgeous when we bought it in the summer. As soon as school started, it was a nightmare with like cars and honking and then there were the church services started up and they were noisy singing really bad country and western. I quite like carols and hymns and all that kind of stuff, but boy, that country and Western Christian music is that's brutal. Anyway, so stuff that we didn't know because we weren't there on a Sunday. We weren't there when school was in. So things to consider. Thank you very much. Good point. Mary85 says it's easier to fall in love with a house during the summer, which especially in Toronto. I mean, the house looks amazing, is lovely, it's a glorious place to be in the summer because there's nothing can go wrong and it's not raining and it's the best time to see a house. Obviously, it's also the worst time to judge whether it's the right house for you because during the winter or during a rainstorm or a thunderstorm or whatever, that's the time to go see a house, see where it's leaking, see what's going wrong, and I'm sure we'll find that out as we hit winter. This year in Toronto, things will come up which I know we wouldn't have been able to plan for or see because we were seeing it in the summer. But things to consider if you are looking to place in the summer. Consider what's going to happen as the seasons have their effect on the house. So great point, Mary 85. Patty 1971 says she lives in a rented semi-detached house, and for the first year or so that she's been living in the house or however long it was empty. The other side of her semi-detached house was empty, so it was fantastic, lovely, peaceful, quiet, and tranquil. All of a sudden, someone moves in next door, and it's not that they're being really noisy, it's just that they are there, and there's suddenly noise that they weren't used to. So if you're used to this beautiful, quiet place, and all of a sudden someone moves in next door, you're going to go crazy. So again, it's like change over time. These are things that you have to consider. You move in, you go, wow, it's really quiet now because there's no one living next door. What's going to happen when someone does move next door? I mean, just things to keep in mind. Next up, Jane Lowther says, check with local councils on impending developments and stuff. Very, very smart. Last place we had, we were about to sign the deal. We went on to the local council site and found out that they were going to tear down the structure across the street and rebuild it, and it was going to be like 6 years of hellish renovations. And this guy didn't mention it in the contract. So we got that in the contract. We knocked a chunk off the price again. Really, really useful for us. We were willing to put up with it. But we were willing to put up with it for a price, and it was great negotiating for us. So great thing to do. Check with local councils, find out what developments are being pursued in the area. Okay, the last comment I'm going to address here is Tamara Bells, who says that she doesn't want to buy a house because basically it would be owned by the bank. And it's a good point. It's something that people say a lot to me, like, you're basically just renting from the bank. Well, that's true. And in a way, for me, that actually makes me feel better about owning a house because it is kind of like renting from the bank. It sounds a lot less scary than owning a house. But for me, I feel that the rental payments are a bit of a wasted money. I feel like I'm throwing money away. I know that I can pick up the phone and get someone to fix something in a rental that I can't do in my own house. That's up to my responsibility, maintenance, upkeep, taxes, all that kind of stuff. That's all your responsibility when you buy a house. That can be scary, and it has been scary in the past for me. But for some reason, I guess just because I'm used to it, it doesn't bother me so much. So the idea of renting from the bank is really almost comforting to me because I feel like, well, it's just I have to pay rent to somebody, so I'll pay it to them. In my case, it was cheaper to own a house and have a mortgage than it was to be paying the rent that we were paying. Like, our rent was much, much higher than our mortgage payments. So at the end of the day, I worked it out, and I could be wrong, but because my math can be somewhat suspect, basically worked it out that it was cheaper for us to buy the house than it was to rent or continue renting. So anyways, thank you all so much for the comments. Keep them coming. I will, I'm sure, come back to this subject. Obviously, I'm a big fan of the whole real estate thing. I'm also a big reno nerd, so there'll be lots of discussions about how to improve those houses you've now bought. And so until we geek again, cheerio!